Good evening. Steve Danks, Hemp Works Radio, on the timeforhemp.com radio network, part of the iHeartRadio. Now, tonight, for the second time and the second part, Dr. Robert Melamede. Good evening, Dr. Bob.
Hello there. How are you?
Me, I'm marvellous. Had a totally unstressful day due to technology, but we're here now. So, on the first part of the interview, I think we got up to the point of where we was going to start talking. We was onto the endocannabinoid system and how important it was to the human race and virtually every other animal that has a spine on this planet at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, I guess
take it from there.
I was hopefully I gave the foundation for the physics of life, so we understand that regardless of what religion you're at, it's hard to deny the realities of things once they can be proven. And I think we're at a point now where, you have to accept evolution as a natural process. Or if you don't believe in evolution, you still have to accept that there's a continuity, a continual increase in endocannabinoid activity in the brains of evolving species or species that were just put down where some had greater capacity than others.
Can I just say something, Dr. Bob?
Yes, sir.
Now, after I took this cannabis medicine after taking the 47 weeks of interferon, and I went back to see my consultant that was actually trained by apparently one of the top liver surgeons in the world. And I'm not going to mention his name, but when my consultant saw my scans and he saw that the regeneration of the liver had taken place, even though it was end-stage cirrhosis, and all my stomach linings that were bleeding constantly had repaired themselves, and the 4 bandings that I had put inside of my liver, and all the other things that had gone wrong with me. When he saw that I was healthy and fit and regenerated after 1 year, I said to him, well, what do you make of that? He said to me, well, this is what we call in the medical industry a miracle. And I said, excuse me, sir. I said, you're going to have to put that down as cannabis. And he said, I can't. I said, but that's what's caused it, because you haven't given me anything in the last year to have caused that. You give me drugs for the year previous to that killed me twice. So a physician, not just a physician, a consultant, a liver specialist of hepatitis C would rather believe that it was a miracle than cannabis. And I said to him as well, I said, we have a problem with that, sir, if it's a miracle. He said, why that? I said, because you are of the Muslim faith and I'm apparently of a Christian faith. So whose God calls this miracle? And he just looked at me and laughed. Yeah.
Well, the miracle is that we can influence our health because we are living. Yeah. And it is our nature to try and live. And that's why most people, unless they're severely damaged in other ways, strive to live. And most people would prefer to live healthy, happy lives rather than unhealthy and unhappy lives. And the most amazing social irony, is that cannabis and our endocannabinoid system and the synergy of the two of them is really, what nature has provided us as a tremendous tool to enhance our very being. And yet our social structure has made it a prohibition. The absurdity is what we're seeing now is a flipping of the reality where the people are looking at the guiding social system, our governments and rules, and seeing that they are absurd and ridiculous in so many cases, and recognizing that they are made by blips, and that the people of the future are going to be the flips more so than now. We're shifting the balance. The power of dominance is going from those who want to dominate to those who don't want to dominate but want to cooperate.
Co-cooperation. And as Jack said, the great Jack Herrera, who wrote that wonderful book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, it was perfect, wasn't it? The Emperor wears no clothes.
Yep.
And as we stand up and say that the Emperor wears no clothes, the more of us realise it's just a facade, isn't it? And
Yeah.
what you scientists are telling us, and when we look at the history and the antiquity of what this plant is, then it would be absolutely stupid and idiotic not to use this plant for the very purpose that it was put on Earth for.
Yeah, I mean,
clearly called it a sativa.
Yeah.
Sativa means useful, a useful plant. And tonight I sat with a man on an island that has a history of cannabis growing going back possibly pre-Roman, whose family's lived on this island since that time. And we had the most amazing cannabis conversation. On the island of Arcaria, a Greek island that 2,000 years ago was possibly what we might call now cannabis central, where people came here and traded and worked with this plant in all sorts of formats. So it's not something new, is it, Dr. Bob? It's something that is very old, but we're very lucky now that intelligent people, or as I say, beautiful minds like yourself and Dr. all these other great ones, the Mechamulas, and I like the Whitney, the raw juicer guys. You know, you scientist guys now have shown us how this works in science. And it is part of life, and not just part of human life to me. You know, you guys talk about endocannabinoid system inside of the body. I come from the eco side of it. It's also part of the system of the earth. It's like, if you like, it's the endocannabinoid system of the planet. It makes everything harmonize. And it makes everything work. And every plant works with this plant, because she's the queen of plants. And she's been here so long. Understandably, all things revolve around cannabis. The Romans knew it, the Greeks knew it, and possibly people a long time before that knew it. So it's just so refreshing to hear the science and how this works for us.
Well, that's the beauty, is that intelligent beings can learn from the science that the plant is teaching us something. Evolution, God, whatever, that has created this unfolding of time. The cannabis plant provides a very unique opportunity to enhance our ability to basically be creative and therefore sustainable. So what we have to start to do is understand the very nature of life, so that we can shape our minds, and collectively through our minds, our social systems and our political and economic systems, in a fashion that's going to be consistent with the creative force, whatever kind of God you want to call it. For me, it's just science, generalized open system dynamics, flowing energy. But see, it's because really all people come from the same side of the fence, in that they're human and they're alive. Yeah. And then we start to partition. And that fundamental partition is really whether the people are cannabinoid endowed or not. Because intrinsically, half the population is going to be less in their endocannabinoid activity for any of the things that cannabis regulates. And remember, cannabis regulates, your endocannabinoid system regulates everything in your body from conception until death. So, you know, you might have some person who's in pain, but really optimistic and tolerates their pain. So they may have enough cannabinoids mentally, but wherever the pain is coming from, maybe arthritis or something else, where they're generating pain because they don't have enough cannabinoid activity there. So since cannabis regulates open-mindedness, which is really our door to the future, cannabis regulates really the evolution of human thinking because of its ability to promote our ability to forget. If you can't forget wrong information, then you're stuck living with it. the drug warriors, cannabis is so bad. Well, how could you say that in view of so much evidence, scientifically, anecdotally, historically, to the contrary? It's because these people were fed the crap from our governmentally ill governments, the lies that were spread really for selfish and greedy reasons and ignorant reasons. And people, once they learn that, if they are cannabinoid deficient, are going to be stuck with that view forever. And what I'm suggesting here is that it's time for the cannabinoid endowed people to utilize the knowledge of what the endocannabinoid system is and what the plant is to increase the global human content of cannabinoids and hence increase cannabinoid activity in the world's population to make it more consistent with that creative force that started before there was any life. The creative force caused by flowing energy allowed and mandated that molecules work together to form more complex entities. And it's that ongoing repetitive process of creation and movement forward into more complexity that has made us.
And in spirituality, if you look into the Bhagavad Gita and Shiva and the sadhus, this is what they're saying.
Yeah, a lot of religious thought comes together. If you think of him, and I don't know how accurate this is because I'm only religious in the scientific sense. For me, science is my religion, my guide for how to live and what to do. But from what I see, Christianity wants love, Judaism wants knowledge, and Islam wants submission. Well,
and
what
Hinduism?
It's that we all have to submit as we gain knowledge so that we can become more cooperative and compassionate and loving. They all go together, and the solution that binds them together is the truth of the science that I'm describing, which is, again, why the global chemistry set of humanity needs to just add a little bit more spice to us to be, again, consistent with where we came from, and therefore, barring any other reason to think otherwise, where we will continue to go. And that is to increase the endocannabinoid activity on the forefront of evolution.
Besides the science of it, Bob, you have a personal experience of this, don't you?
Well, I've used cannabis for 52 years now on a pretty regular basis, and most recently I've been able to really benefit from my overall scientific understanding of what life is and how I can change on a systemic, holistic level certain imbalances that resulted from my genetics and from my lifestyle in an effort to improve things that had been bothering me for a decade and were potentially getting worse and worse are now getting better and better. So
can I just put that in street language? Right?
In street language.
Basically, that's right. You held down a pretty responsible job, and you used cannabis during that period that you was working, and you used cannabis.
I used cannabis when I started college. It made me more aware of my ignorance and how if I'm going to go to school, you might as well try learning. And then the more successful you become in learning, the more addicting it is, because think about it. What does learning mean? It means that you're moving your information content and your ability further from equilibrium. Learning is something...
It's street language. It's called excitement.
Yeah, it's charging your brain up with life. Yeah, right. That's what excitement is, right? But it's excitement, healthy excitement. You can be excited doing things that are not healthy. This is organic excitement because your system, your collection of molecules actually feels better by doing things that are consistent with life.
So I'm just going to rule that back again. So here we have Dr. Robert Melamede, who's used cannabis all his life, held down a job, quite an important job, by the way, and now you've retired. I believe you've retired now.
Yes, sir.
And so again now, possibly you're using a more cannabis material, and you're finding more benefit?
I'm using more because I suffer from this chronic illness that we all suffer from. I call it olfartitis. You know, you get
Oh, I had that, Bob, but I've taken those of cannabis and got over it. So I'm interested to see where you're at.
That's the point. Cannabis is the best medicine for olfartitis. And olfartitis manifests itself in so many different ways, you know. It could be cardiovascular disease, autoimmune diseases, it could be anything, because we tend to develop these age-related illnesses because we're exposing ourselves to the friction of life, which is free radicals. And the solution is to increase the oil of life, our endocannabinoid system.
Okay, so Bob, I'm going to throw one at you now, right? So you saying all that with all this wonderful scientific blah, 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 right? And now you're retired, you're taking more, and by the sound of it, you're benefiting more. So do you think there's a limit on how much you should really take, or is it like take as much as you like?
Well, I would say take as much as you need.
Ah, okay then. Yeah.
See, what defines need? Need defines that which makes you healthier.
Fine. Yeah, so I concur with that then, because really I believe it's a vibrational plant, and you find your personal level with it. And whatever that level is, and like if you're in Jamaica living with the Rasta people, they will get up and smoke day and night. That's their level. And possibly some of us living in Western societies, we don't need quite as much as that. Well, but I certainly feel that there is no overdose limit.
I found, and there's pros and cons to this.
Sorry?
I find that, because I eat oil about 3 times a day, that
you say, come on, explain. What do you mean you eat oil?
I rarely smoke. I'm an eater.
Yeah, no. What do you mean you take, what oil you take? What, olive oil? Lard oil?
THC extra, Rick Simpson oil,
cannabis. Oh, right, okay. I want to pick up on it. So you explain to the people what a Rick Simpson oil is.
These are oils, extracts from cannabis that are made with various solvents or procedures. Yeah. And it's kind of like purified hash in a sense.
Okay. So how much do you take of this every day?
It depends on what I got, I take. Recently, I've had a syringe that has had a fairly thick alcohol extract, and I would, squeeze out an inch of that in the morning, and an inch of that in the afternoon, an inch of that at night.
Oh, look, the doctor professor's talking about inches. Well, how much you taking in milligrams?
I definitely, in general, would say I probably only take I would say at the
Don't be shy.
No, I'm just trying to be accurate, and okay. It's hard to say, but I take under 100 milligrams a day in general. Well, listen to this irony here, The people who are more cannabinoid endowed, because they are more optimistic, are more likely to try things. They're more adventurous because they feel they'll be successful. Okay? The people who are cannabinoid deficient, they are much less likely to try something new because they don't adjust well to change, because their biochemistry is stressed by change, because all change ultimately, even if it's good change, is biochemically stressful. But if you make enough endocannabinoids, if your body makes enough pot or you take enough pot, then you adjust to that change much better, and it's much less stressful. And that's part of the whole anti-aging aspect, because stress is associated with the free radical production and therefore the damage and therefore the deterioration instead of the growth and synthesis, which intrinsically requires cooperation and love.
That's poetry. Right, Bob, sorry, another $1 million question. Are your endocannabinoid efficient?
I think that me and my children are endocannabinoid sufficient. We share, fortunately, the happy gene, and that just makes life a lot easier.
So they're all breastfed?
Yes.
Of course. And as we all know, the science says that breast milk is very similar to the cannabis milk.
No, you're missing a very important point here.
Oh, go for it, please. Tell me. As I say, I'm the layman. I'm the street boy.
There's actually psychoactive endocannabinoids in mother's milk.
What you're saying, that mothers are feeding their children what the DEA for many years have called a drug.
Exactly.
So basically then, in a layman's term, mothers that breastfeed could possibly be charged with drug trafficking?
Well, you know, that favorite jokes when I give my talks. Should we arrest nursing mothers for getting their kids stoned, or should we just arrest all women for walking around with paraphernalia?
Oh my God. We've hit something here, haven't we? Well, ladies, I think all the ladies that are possibly in Italian, I love the word Italian word for inginta or pregnant, I think you should write in and I think this is an open debate, really, because we don't want people going around saying that you can't breastfeed your children cannabis. As Mother Nature designed.
I guess so. Well, it gets even funnier. If there's another interesting little possibility here, that what in terms of cannabinoids being in breast milk, that's unambiguously true, and you can see the consequences if you inhibit that in mice that don't have the CB1 receptor, or by using drugs that inhibit the CB1 receptor. They're not very fertile. And if you inhibit the CB1 receptor on the newborn mice, they actually starve to death and die from never nursing. You know, it's fundamentally in there. But beyond that, there's another very interesting possibility. That is absolutely true, but this is now a possibility. First of all, what we see is that mammals are an increase in evolution compared to before they appeared. And we...
No, sorry, can you just explain that again, Bob? That didn't come quite through clear.
Well, there's a series of progression in evolution, going from simpler to more complex. And, mankind is at the forefront of evolution in our ability to adapt and to adjust our environment so we don't even have to adapt. We adapt our environment to us, whereas historically things survive by adapting to the environment.
Got you. Dolphins that swim in the sea have adapted to swimming in the sea, and they haven't tried to change the sea, where man has tried to change his environment to suit his needs. Man, we got you.
Right?
Yeah. I understand that. Yeah.
See, and that's all part of having the increased complexity that comes with our brain and with our ability for our brain to be creative.
Well, look, it's been wonderful talking to you. Are we going to do a part 3? There seems to be loads more to talk about. I'm sorry I've interrupted so much tonight, Bob. But
no, I just go with the flow. You see, that's the whole thing here. That's the whole beauty, that life doesn't have to be all black and white and straight lines. In nature, organized. Not black and white, and nature is not straight lines. Yeah. And yet, because as we first started to learn to manipulate our environment, the creativity was the novelty, but then you try to make things rigid so you could reproduce things. And there was a time where that's what was needed, You needed to develop the mechanics of engineering skills, for example. But to drive it to create new things required creativity. So there's a dialogue between the mind and creativity and the mechanics of implementing things. And we've reached a point now where we can do such incredible manipulations of our environment and of the matter that makes up our environment that we have now come to a decision point where we can either blindly move forward, driven by ignorance and greed and insecurity and fear and aggression and all of the sickness that characterizes so much of humanity, or we can decide that we want to really survive and thrive into a future in which we would be cooperative, in which energy would become cheaper for a variety of innovative reasons, done out of creativity, enhanced by the cannabinoid system of every human being. And we move into a whole new future where we interact with our environment, with each other in a way that reflects the creative nature, the harmony, the love, the submission to the reality that there are rules of nature, of whatever God you want to call it, but of the world around us. There are basic operating principles, and if you're going to go against the nature, it used to be, remember the advertisement, it's not nice to try and fool Mother Nature. You can't fool Mother Nature in the long run. You can make believe and you can rape and pillage for so long, but eventually you run out of it and you get screwed. So let's be smart and move into the future and embrace the historical reality of an ongoing increase in endocannabinoids and cannabinoid activity, because now we're smart enough to grow it and analyze it and discover it and use it better and better all the time.
One love. Or as Mr. Mahatma Gandhi said, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice.
It is, and more people are learning that, and cannabis facilitates that knowledge in that direction. So, of course, you're going to have the people who benefit, Eisenhower said, beware of the industrial complex. And, there are people, think of the Cheneys and the Rumsfelds and some of these other beautiful people. It's a strange world, and right now the cannabis revolution is enhancing the movement towards a greater concentration of flips, forward-looking people, cannabinoid-endowed, adaptable, peace-loving, harmonious, creative people, away from the Gestapo of the past.
It is just so true. I just feel that...
It is. It's so
the
true.
People, I walk around in my own little life, and I see people that have not got this endocannabinoid system up and running. Yep. We've changed. Something's gone on in life, and we seem to have changed. We're endocannabinoid rich or endocannabinoid deficient, and them that are endocannabinoid deficient, you're not working properly, brothers and sisters. Yeah, honestly, and it becomes so clear that when your brain is endocannabinoid rich and when your body's working with this plant inside of it, it's like drinking water, it's like taking carrot juice, it's like sunlight. It's so fundamental to the life that you live, and it benefits your life so much. It'd be stupid, man. It'd be like not drinking water and the doctor saying you're dehydrated and giving you pills for dehydration when all you need is a little drop of water. One love.
And tragically, that's an accurate representation of so much of what goes on. I was with a man this weekend whose friend had a pinned ankle from various problems that he had, and he twisted his...
When you say pinned, is that with metal?
Yes, and he twisted it, and he went to the hospital, and the doctor looked at it and said, "Oh, this is terrible. We're going to have to amputate it tonight." And my friend who's with his friend looks at it and says, "I don't smell any infection. I don't see any swelling. What the fuck is this guy talking about?" So he calls up the surgeon who originally did it and said, "That doesn't sound right to me." And he winds up the surgeon, checks it out. And of course he didn't need his leg amputated, his ankle amputated that night. The countries of the world, the governments are enriched in cannabinoid deficient blips.
Yes.
They are greedy. They are power hungry. They are insecure. They are dangerous to the survival of mankind. We have to replace our governments with people who are cannabinoid endowed, the same way that governments in the past tested you and said you couldn't work in the government if you used marijuana. We need to reverse that. If you're cannabinoid deficient and you don't properly supplement with the necessary nutrient to make your brain function correctly, we don't want you in the government.
I'll tell you what as well, Bob. The interesting thing I find about this plant, I mean, I've been working with it on hands-on situation for many years. I find now that really what I know about it, I'm just learning about it. It just seems to be opening itself up to so many different possibilities.
Well, you know what? Think of what you're really saying. When you say you're opening yourself up to possibilities, it means you are becoming more alive. What we have to do is we have to shape our minds so that our wants and our desires and our efforts are consistent with the creative force. You know, we have to submit to this reality of reality. And that is one of cooperation at this point for mankind to survive.
Yeah. And I want to survive.
All righty, buddy. It's been fun.
Yeah, man, you know it. Look, Dr. Robert Melamede, thank you very, very much. What can I say?
Thank you very, very much.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio. Please share us with your friends.
This year, we've covered many depressing aspects of our criminal justice system, from how mandatory minimum sentencing has crowded our prisons, to how bail punishes the poor, to how overstretched public defenders threaten your right to a fair trial, to how small municipal violations can wind up putting you in the fuck barrel. And, fun fact, if you binge-watch those episodes in order, you are entitled to an ice cream cone at Dairy Queen. So, congratulations, enjoy it, you have earned it. Just to be clear, it's not free, and Dairy Queen is not involved in any capacity. The point is, though, after learning about our shattered justice system, you frankly earned the right to eat your feelings with a peanut buster parfait. The only frozen treat in America with nut buster as part of its name. Anyway, tonight, instead of talking about how people wind up in prison, I thought we'd talk about how they leave, a process known as prison re-entry. It's particularly relevant this week in light of what happened just last weekend.
The largest one-time release of federal prisoners in history is getting underway today. The move is in response to a loosening of mandatory minimum sentences for non-violent drug offenders. About 6,000 prisoners are being set free today.
Yes, 6,000 mostly low-level drug offenders were released last week. And if you are one of them, let me bring you up to speed on what you may have missed since you've been inside. Ubers replace cabs. Everyone pretends to like kale now. Matthew McConaughey has an Oscar. And in 4 states, pot is legal, which for some of you must seem like a cruel, cruel irony. Now, unsurprisingly, this news was not exactly welcomed by everyone.
When you release people like that, you're going to have an increase in crime.
Okay.
No doubt in my mind.
Some believe the prisoner release is a racial deal that will put Americans in jeopardy.
It's part of an effort to reduce prison overcrowding, but who exactly are these prisoners? Are they dangerous?
Yes. Are they dangerous? Is this the purge? Is it happening? Is this the purge? What, do I need to buy a mask or will one be provided for me? I don't know how the purge works. Now, to be clear, by and large, these prisoners were going to be released in a couple of years anyway, so people are essentially freaking out about something that, had it happened 2 years later, they wouldn't even have noticed. And it's also worth noting that more than 600,000 people get released from state and federal prisons every year, so 6,000 more would represent an increase of less than 1%. And the only time anyone actually notices a change that small is your dad with the thermostat. And hey, when you have your own place, you can heat it like the tropics, but not while he's paying the bills. You're burning money. Unfortunately, we have a lot of misconceptions about what leaving prison is actually like. Perhaps because it's often presented in movies and TV as a happy moment when former inmates rejoin families and friends and put their life back together.
I'm free! I'm free! Oh, Warden, I never thought I'd get out. That's a good hug. That's a good hug.
What's important is that we cut a deal and Kenny was finally free.
Oh, that's so nice. Although the last scene was slightly undercut when Patrick the Starfish realised SpongeBob had joined the Aryan Brotherhood while inside. So, hey, he did what he had to do. He did what he had to do. But the sad truth is, for a surprisingly high number of prisoners, their time on the outside may be brief.
The national average of recidivism is 50%. So we're spending $80 billion and failing half the time, right? That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. The only thing we're allowed to throw billions at just to fail half the time is this man. Vandalised Urban Outfitters mannequin Johnny Depp. The fact that around half of people who leave prison end up going back is horrifying. But when you look at the challenges they face, it gets a little less surprising. In fact, let me walk you through what it's like when you get out of prison. And let's just start with minute 1. Because when inmates exit that gate to start a new life, they could find themselves in the middle of nowhere with little to nothing in their pockets. And the lucky ones might get enough for a bus ticket and a meal, but even exonerated prisoners like Glenn Ford can walk out with little to build a life on.
Glenn Ford was given a $20 gift card the day he left Angola prison.
Gave me a card for $20 and said, wish you luck.
How long did that last you?
1 meal. I had some fried chicken, tea, and the French fries came with it. I had $4 and change left.
A $20 gift card. If you're exonerated, you should probably be leaving prison with more than you take home after a disappointing office Secret Santa. And hey, don't act surprised that gift was terrible. Your name got picked by Janice from accounting, and you know she don't give a She don't give a about you. And look, once your money runs out, you can find yourself hungry and desperate, because in many states, anyone with felony drug convictions can be banned from government food benefits. And if your family lives in public housing, you may not be able to return home, because some places require tenants to sign papers banning relatives with convictions from entering their homes. And while those rules may have been written to reduce crime in public housing, they're administered so broadly it can lead to situations like this.
Geraldine Miller signed the ban after her son robbed a bodega at 16.
Had I known what I know today, I would have never signed that paper.
Miller herself now faces eviction after her son was caught helping her with groceries after she became ill. She has to go to her brother's apartment to see her son.
Nitra want me to throw my son away. I can't.
Look, we all want people who've committed crimes to learn their lesson, but never help your sick mother with groceries sounds more like the kind of lesson you'd learn from a shitty Boy Scout leader. Hey, kids, never help your sick mother with groceries, always know where the exits are in a dogfight, and never pay a stripper up front. Scouts dismissed. And look, restricted access to food and shelter could be just the beginning of your problems. Depending on where you live, a felony conviction can cut you off from everything from voting to a driver's license to, and this is true, one Florida county's home weatherization program. So I guess Florida is perfectly happy to put people behind bars, but they draw the line at putting them behind storm windows and insulation. And while you could pay for food, shelter and weatherization with a job, your opportunities to get one of those might be severely limited. There are state and local bans preventing ex-felons from working as everything from a nurse to a septic tank cleaner to, in Mississippi, an alligator rancher. As if breaking into the alligator ranching business wasn't already hard enough as it is. You know, it's all who you know who's been eaten by an alligator in that game. And a criminal record can even make getting an interview for a job difficult.
Nearly every job application will ask a potential employee if he or she has ever been convicted of a felony, a question that in some cases will automatically disqualify you from getting hired.
It makes you a little uncomfortable. You get that anxiety when you get to that box. It's like, wow, how are they going to judge me, you know, knowing that I committed this crime? How are they going to feel about this?
And it's understandable that an employer might want to know if an applicant has a criminal history. But to have that question on a form before you've even met the person seems a little unfair. They may have changed significantly since then, and you shouldn't judge someone on what they may be most ashamed of. Imagine if you had once f***ed a watermelon. Maybe it happened 14 years ago, you're not proud of it, and you've changed since then. If every job application you filled out had this question on it, with no opportunity to give context of how drunk you were or the fact you haven't even looked at a watermelon for over a decade, you'd begin to feel like the deck was stacked against you. And some states seem to even acknowledge how hard this process can be. Ohio actually has a list of job tips for ex-offenders with do's and don'ts, such as do be honest, but if you're asked why you left your last job, don't use negative words like went to jail. Instead, do use terms like relocated or contract ended. Both of these are true. And they are. And before you judge, that is not a lie. Everyone tries to present the most flattering image of themselves. You do it when you use a filter on an Instagram photo of yourself. Even the Queen does it, because this is her official portrait, but this is who she actually is. But deep down, she knows you can't put that face on money. And all of this is before we get to the difficulty of ex-prisoners navigating parole. 2/3 of parolees who go back to prison do so not due to a new crime, but because of parole violations, sometimes for reasons as simple as missing appointments or failing a drug test. And for some, it may be because they're dealing with untreated substance abuse or mental illness, but for others who are trying their hardest, satisfying the conditions of parole can be maddeningly difficult. Look at Bilal Chapman. He spent a decade in prison for a non-violent drug offence, but despite the odds, he managed to get his life back on track and find a job that he loved. Things were going well until he hit a problem regarding scheduling meetings with his probation officer.
So he got off, I think, every day about 4. And so my job I didn't get off till 4:30. I said, okay, well, can I come in early? He said, no, you can't come in early. I said, well, okay, well, then can I come a little later? Can I get there at like 5 if you leave at 4:30? I don't stay and wait for you. I'm not going to wait for you. So I don't want to lose my job. This is the things that I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm out here for, is I'm working to be a productive member of society. I felt set up. I felt like I was set up to fail. I felt most people in that situation are set up to fail.
And you know what? It is hard to argue with that. Because the only way Bilal could make an appointment at 4 if he left at 4:30 would be if he somehow owned a DeLorean, a TARDIS, or whatever the Jean-Claude Van Damme used in Time Cop. I can't remember. I think he travelled through time by doing the splits. It's been a while, but I think it was a splits-based system. Also, depending on where you live, you might not just struggle to meet your parole officer, you might struggle to pay him. Because in many states, you actually have to pay for probation and parole service. And in Pennsylvania, they charge a $60 fee just to enter the program. And if you don't have the money for all the fees they charge, as one Pennsylvania parolee explains, you can be forced to make a truly ridiculous choice.
You go to see your parole officer and you don't have money, they will hold you.
Job or no job. And if you don't pay, you come back to jail.
Yeah.
I know one thing. I found myself selling drugs to pay back Pennsylvania.
Oh, my God. So in order to pay for the program, to keep him away from dealing drugs, he has to earn money drug dealing. At this point, the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections might as well change its motto to, "Y'all come back now, you hear?" By now, you may be wondering who is responsible for a system this broken. Well, interestingly, the answer is pretty much everybody. Many of the obstacles you've seen originated in the tough-on-crime 90s with surprisingly little debate. Remember the ban on ex-prisoners from entering public housing, which forced Geraldine Miller to kick out her son? Well, here's where that started.
From now on, the rule for residents who commit crime and peddle drugs should be one strike and you're out.
That is a State of the Union standing ovation from both sides. Almost nothing gets a full-room standing ovation during those speeches, with the exception of veterans, God, and the speech being over. Now, in many cases, these laws were passed with barely a second thought. The 1996 law, letting states restrict food stamps for ex-drug felons, was debated in the Senate for all of 3 minutes. I've been talking about this subject for nearly 5 times longer than they did, and I'm leaving a of a lot of stuff out. Mainly because I had to make time for Time Cop references. And frankly as well, no one batted an eye when Bart Gordon, a Democrat from Tennessee, justified cutting off federal student aid for prisoners with this logic.
Just because one blind hog may occasionally find an acorn doesn't mean many other blind hogs will. The same principle applies to giving federal Pell Grants to prisoners.
First of all, pigs find nuts by smell, so a blind one is at no significant disadvantage in an acorn hunt. And second of all, people aren't pigs, you fucking arsehole. And look, I know, it's not always easy to care about the welfare of ex-prisoners, and some are going to reoffend no matter what you do. But the fact remains, over 95% of all prisoners will eventually be released. So it's in everyone's interest that we try to give them a better chance at success, because under the current system, if they do manage to overcome all the obstacles we've set, it's a minor miracle. And one of the people who have managed to beat those odds is Bilal Chapman. I'm happy to say that he is still in his job and he's still doing well, and I'm even happy to say he's actually with us this evening, so please welcome Bilal Chapman! There's Bilal. There's Bilal. Bilal Chapman, ladies and gentlemen. Please, sit down. Bilal. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I know that you were not sure about doing this, so I want to thank you for being here.
Yes.
Now, you managed to keep the job that you were talking about in that clip, and we saw the state of Ohio giving advice to prisoners about how to present their truth. And when you were applying for jobs, you listed your previous employer as, what did you list?
State of California.
The state of California. That's right. That is, yeah, that's technically true.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now, I know, how is the job going?
Absolutely fantastic. I couldn't have scripted another way, any way better than what's going on. I'm very excited. I'm very fortunate and blessed that they've given me this opportunity. And yes, I'm dedicated to them. Absolutely wonderful.
And I know that one of the reasons you're nervous is that because not everyone you work for or with knows about the fact that you were once in prison. Now, you're going to work tomorrow morning.
Yes.
They may know by then.
Yes.
So I guess what I want to know is what particularly are you most worried about?
I guess I'm more worried about being judged for what I used to be. I'm not that same person. You know, I've dedicated myself. I've changed myself. I'm no longer that person. You know, as time goes on, you become, I become a better person. I've worked really hard at the things that I've taken from society. And so, yeah.
So what are the concerns, though, that what they will think or how they might behave? What is the spectrum of circumstances that you're concerned about?
I guess people are judgmental. People that don't know, I don't want anybody to look at me as the ex-con. I want them to look at me as the person I am now. I'm a supervisor. I'm a good employee. I'm an employer. I even hire and I fire.
Right.
So I think I want them to look at me as that. Continue to live with that.
They were about to both cheer and boo you when you said that. Okay, I guess that it's interesting you say that, right? That you don't want to be defined by something that you did so long ago, because we're probably guilty of giving you a reductive term in that way, because we're having you on tonight as Bilal, the ex-prisoner.
Right.
Which is clearly not who you've been for a long time.
Right.
Now, everyone has at least 3 other things about them that are interesting. What 3 things about you not related to that would you like people to know?
Well, I would like people to know, I'm going to grow tomatoes,
Wait. You know? I'm going to stop you.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop you at number 1 there, Bilal, because that's a lot more interesting than I think you think it is. Yeah. And I'm hoping that tomorrow your fellow workers may choose mainly to focus on the fact you grow tomatoes as being a more interesting part of your life. I know that one of the things that's interesting is that I know how hesitant you were to do this as we talked to you through the week, as we even talked to you today and tonight. I guess a question would be, why did you end up talking to us? Why are you here?
I'm here because of the fact that, I may never do this again. I've done other interviews. I may never do this again because this takes me back to being that prisoner again. I'm not that prisoner today. I'm a taxpayer. I work. I'm a citizen. I'm a voter. That's who I want to be. Those are the things that have defined me today. It's not what I did before. I did things years ago that I'm ashamed of, that I don't like. But I don't want to relive that. At the same time, I want this opportunity to be for someone who says, oh, man, I can never get a chance. I'll never have a chance. There's always a chance. We'll just keep going. But I want the person also that looks down at us, that maybe there's a chance for other people, too.
That's great. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here. Bilal Chapman, the tomato grower.
Hi, I'm Scott with Flex Your Rights. This is a video that I've been promising to do for a while now, so I hope you find it helpful. We've talked a lot about why you should refuse police searches, and you should check out my video, 5 Reasons You Should Never Agree to a Police Search, if you need to hear more about that. But here's the thing that keeps coming up. A lot of folks have pointed out that refusing a police search doesn't just make the cops disappear in a poof of smoke. And that's true, it doesn't. I mean, lots of difficult things can happen after you refuse a police search. So let's talk about what those things are. And one of the main points I want to get across here is that just because you're afraid of what might happen after you refuse a search, after you assert your rights, it's still your best move. And so that's important to understand. And I want to make it clear to everybody that I'm not clueless about all of the ways that this stuff can go wrong, because we get that response a lot. Like, are you out of your mind? If you assert your rights, the police are just going to do this or they're going to do that. We're very familiar with some of the things that they can do. And so let's talk about them and how your constitutional rights apply even in some of those worst case kind of scenarios. So let's get into it here. Say the cops pull you over for something kind of trivial, like an unsafe lane change, like sort of one of those catch-all kind of things, that the excuses that they use. But they're basically just profiling you. And soon enough, they're asking to search your car. And you say, no, officer, I'm sorry, I'm not consenting to any searches. So now, one of 2 things is going to happen. They're either going to search you or they aren't. First of all, obviously, if they don't search you, then hooray for you, you win. You get to drive home safely. And, this is actually a very real possibility. Officers really will back down in many cases because they simply don't have probable cause. And, not every cop is a corrupt scumbag who's going to make stuff up or give you a really hard time. So understand that this does happen. I mean, I get emails all the time from people who refused to search and then didn't get searched. The combination of properly asserting your constitutional rights and coming across as a calm, potentially innocent person, and the police officer actually lacking probable cause, not really having a valid reason that they can cite to search your vehicle. All of those 3 things can come together, and you really might not get searched. But as many of you have pointed out, things often just aren't nearly that easy. In many cases, when you refuse a police search, the officer will threaten you with all sorts of things, and this is where it gets really tough for you to hold your ground. Keep in mind that police can lie, so they might say they can impound your car, which is bull. They'll make all sorts of threats, but remember one thing. They're trying to get you to say that it's okay to search. See, if your consent didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying so hard to get it. So now you're basically playing a high-stakes game with the officer. Their job is to make you say it's okay to search the car, and your job is not to say that that's okay, no matter how hard they pressure you. So it's a battle of wits, basically. And once you get into this situation, the next thing you need to do is ask if you're free to go. This is important because the officer not only needs to have a legal reason to search you, but they also need a legal reason to even hold you by the side of the road. And unless you say that you want to leave, then the law considers the encounter voluntary. So keep this in mind. For example, if you refuse a search and then the officer threatens to call in the drug-sniffing dogs, which is something that they'll do in many situations, the officer can legally call a dog anytime he wants, but the officer can't legally detain you without evidence. So if asking if you're free to go can provide legal protection against that dog sniff. So now let's talk about the worst case scenario. You've refused a search and you've asked if you're free to go. And you've done both of these things very politely, which is important. But they don't let you go and they do search you and you get arrested for something stupid like, say, fireworks. You still did the right things. You asserted your constitutional rights, and the circumstances of your arrest do matter in a court of law. I mean, honestly, it's actually even really common for charges to get dropped before you even go to court. If the magistrate looks at the case and realizes that it's not likely to hold up, that's a jurisdictional thing that varies from place to place. But I do hear about areas where sometimes the police are a little bit overzealous and make a lot of petty, marijuana arrests or things like that. And those cases don't always even result in actual criminal charges. But if you are charged, as will often be the case, then your lawyer has some really solid legal grounds on which to challenge the evidence against you. And this is really typical stuff. I mean, when in any criminal case, one of the first things that happens is your lawyer would make a motion to suppress and challenge any evidence that he or she feels was illegally obtained against you. And so evidence resulting from a search that you didn't consent to, evidence that was turned up during a prolonged detention when you'd asked if you were free to leave and they didn't actually turn out to have legal grounds to detain you. All of those things are eligible for suppression. And if you talk to any good criminal defense attorney, these kinds of hearings are things that they can win. They win this stuff. Not every time, but there's a system here. And so that's really why it's so important to understand how to assert these particular rights, even if you're convinced that the officer doesn't care about your rights, even if you're convinced that the officer is going to search you anyway. The point is that you have to create legal grounds on which to challenge the officer's conduct later on. And this can also apply to civil rights lawsuits, to other types of situations, if you're filing a complaint, all of these things. If you agree to be detained, if you agree to be searched, you can't challenge the officer's actions. And obviously, a police encounter can go wrong in any number of ways, and police do routinely violate people's rights in horrible ways and in all sorts of situations. So, I can't promise you a good outcome. I can't promise you some of the better outcomes that I've enumerated today. But I can tell you how to increase your odds of getting those best outcomes, and so that's really what this is about. So, please understand that the fear that your rights might be violated is all the more reason to know and assert those rights in any and every police encounter. So please keep that in mind, and please be safe out there. As always, all of our videos, including our very cool instructional videos, are available on YouTube as well. So check those out, and please visit our website for more information. We have an excellent FAQ, and you can also order DVD copies of our videos if you're interested in making a donation, and we do really appreciate your support there. So thanks so much, and be safe, everyone.